The Arizona desert burned beneath the afternoon sun, its heat shimmering over the endless stretch of red earth and sagebrush. Rancher Luke Weston tugged at the reins of his horse, squinting toward the horizon. He'd been rounding up strays since sunrise, his canteen nearly empty, his throat dry as dust. The only sound was the soft clop of hooves and the far-off cry of a hawk. Then he saw her. At first, he thought it was a trick of the heat, a shape lying half-hidden near a mesquite tree. But as he drew closer, the shape turned into the still body of a woman. Luke's heart lurched. He jumped off his horse, boots crunching in the sand, and rushed forward. The woman was young, her skin bronze and glistening with sweat. Her dark hair spilled over her shoulders, tangled with desert dust. The intricate beadwork on her torn buckskin dress told him she was Apache. Luke knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her lips were pale, trembling slightly as she whispered something he almost didn't catch. "Snake, bit me." Luke's pulse quickened. His eyes darted over her body until he spotted a faint trickle of blood soaking through the fabric just above her knee, under her skirt. The skin around it was swollen and purple. He froze for a moment, unsure what to do. The wound was hidden, and decency told him not to lift her clothing. But every second he waited, the venom spread further through her veins. "Hang on, ma'am," he muttered, pulling off his hat and wiping the sweat from his brow. "I'll help you. Just stay with me." Her breathing was shallow, her eyelids fluttering. He could see her pulse weakening by the second. Luke looked around, no one in sight, no time to fetch the doctor from town, which was a good 10 miles away. He clenched his jaw. Either he helped her now, or she'd be gone before sundown. "Lord forgive me," he said under his breath as he carefully lifted the edge of her skirt just enough to see the bite clearly. 2 small puncture marks, angry and red, stared back at him. The swelling was bad. He didn't have whiskey or a knife sharp enough to cut it open properly, but he knew one old cowboy remedy: suck out the venom before it reached her heart. Luke leaned down, pressing his lips near the wound, and drew the poison out, spitting it onto the sand. He repeated it several times, heart pounding in his chest. The Apache woman moaned weakly, her body twitching. When he finally tied a strip from his shirt around her leg to slow the blood flow, he saw color slowly return to her face. "You'll make it," he said quietly, though he wasn't sure if she heard him. He lifted her carefully into his arms and carried her to his horse. The desert wind whipped around them as he rode hard toward his ranch. The sun dipped low behind the mesas, painting the sky blood red. He didn't know who she was, or why fate had thrown her in his path, but one thing was certain. He couldn't leave her. Not now. By the time Luke reached his ranch, twilight had fallen across the desert. The horizon burned orange, fading into deep indigo. Coyotes howled in the distance as he rode into the yard, dust swirling around the horse's hooves. The Apache woman was limp in his arms, her breathing faint but steady. "Hold on, miss," Luke murmured, sliding off his horse with her in his grasp. He carried her inside his small cabin, a one-room shelter of timber and stone, and gently laid her on his bed. The air inside was cool compared to the heat outside, filled with the faint scent of leather, smoke, and pine oil. He lit a lantern, the warm glow falling on her face. Her skin was pale beneath the tan, and her pulse fluttered weakly at her throat. Luke grabbed his canteen and poured a little water between her lips. She coughed softly, then swallowed. That was a good sign. Luke worked fast. He tore more cloth from his shirt to clean the wound, wiping the blood and dirt away. The venom had slowed, but the swelling still worried him. He had no doctor, no medicine, only his own grit and prayer. "Don't you quit on me now," he whispered. "I didn't bring you all this way to lose you." He mixed some crushed sage leaves and alcohol from his flask into a paste, pressing it gently onto her leg. It was a remedy his mother used to swear by, and he hoped it would draw the poison out. The woman stirred, her brow creasing in pain. Her hand brushed his wrist. "You saved me," she breathed weakly, her accent soft but clear. Luke paused, surprised to hear her voice. "Trying to," he said quietly, meeting her half-open eyes. "You got bit bad. You'll need rest and water." Her lips trembled into something like a smile before her eyes closed again. He stayed by her side all night, dozing lightly in a chair. Each time she moved or whimpered, he checked her pulse, adjusted the bandage, or gave her another sip of water. The storm outside rolled across the desert, thunder echoing through the mesas. It was a long, sleepless night. When dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight spilled through the cabin window, casting golden light over the woman's face. Her breathing was steady now, her color returning. Luke rubbed his tired eyes and exhaled in relief. He studied her features, the proud lines of her cheekbones, the strength in her jaw even in sleep. She looked like a fighter. Whoever she was, she'd survived worse than a snakebite. Luke stepped outside, stretching as the sun rose. He fed his horse and fetched more water from the creek. The desert was calm now, birds chirping faintly in the cool morning air. When he returned, he found her awake, sitting up slowly, her hand on the bandaged leg. Her eyes met his, dark, deep, and unreadable. "You should rest," Luke said softly. "You're safe here." For a long moment, she just watched him, cautious yet grateful. Then she whispered, "My name, Nayeli." Luke smiled faintly. "Luke Weston. Guess we're properly introduced now." And as the desert light filled the small cabin, a fragile thread of trust began to form between the two, one that neither expected. 3 days passed, and the desert sun rose high above Luke Weston's ranch. The Apache woman, Nayeli, was slowly regaining her strength. Each morning, Luke found her sitting by the window, her dark hair braided loosely over her shoulder, watching the golden plains stretch endlessly toward the horizon. Luke tried not to stare, but something about her presence unsettled him, in a way he didn't mind. She was quiet, proud, and cautious, like a wild creature unsure whether to trust a human's hand. Still, she accepted his help without words. When he brought her food, beans, bread, or stew, she would nod slightly, her gaze always calm and observant. "Your leg's healing well," Luke said one afternoon, crouching to check her bandage. "No sign of poison now." Nayeli watched him, her expression unreadable. "You know how to heal," she said softly, her voice carrying the rhythm of her people's tongue. Luke chuckled faintly. "Cowboys learn a little of everything. Out here, you either figure it out or die trying." She gave a faint smile, her first since waking up, and something in Luke's chest stirred. He hadn't seen that kind of warmth in a long time, not since before the wars, before the land had turned harsh and lonely. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the crimson hills, Luke sat by the fireplace, mending a saddle strap. Nayeli sat nearby, quietly weaving something from strands of dried yucca fiber. The soft crackle of the fire filled the silence between them. "Why were you out there alone?" Luke finally asked, glancing at her. Nayeli paused, fingers stilling. Her eyes darkened with a shadow of memory. "My people moved north," she said slowly. "I stayed behind, to find something that was taken." "What was that?" She looked up at him, her voice steady. "My brother. Soldiers took him." Luke lowered his gaze, guilt tightening in his chest. He'd fought in the border skirmishes years ago, seen both sides spill blood over the same patch of earth. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I've seen good men lost to bad orders." Nayeli nodded faintly. "Not all white men are cruel," she said after a moment. "You helped me." He looked up at her then, caught off guard by the softness in her tone. "Couldn't just ride away," he said. "Didn't seem right." Silence settled again, but it wasn't heavy anymore. The air between them felt different, like a bridge slowly forming between two distant worlds. That night, Luke gave her his bed and lay down near the fireplace, watching the embers glow. He listened to the desert wind whisper outside, and his mind drifted to the woman sleeping just a few feet away. He'd saved her life, but she had unknowingly awakened something in him, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was gratitude, maybe admiration. Or maybe, beneath the rough layers of a lonely cowboy's heart, it was something deeper. Whatever it was, Luke knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. By the end of the week, the desert had turned softer, the harsh winds easing, the nights cooler. Nayeli was walking again, her limp nearly gone. Luke watched her from the porch as she moved through the corral, brushing his horse with slow, careful strokes. The morning sun painted her skin in gold, her dark hair glinting like obsidian. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, trying to hide the quiet smile tugging at his lips. "You handle horses better than some ranch hands have known," he called out. Nayeli looked up, amusement flickering in her eyes. "Your horse understands calm. He does not fear me," she replied simply. Luke chuckled. "Guess he's got good judgment then." They shared a brief laugh, small, genuine, and unexpected. The days had turned from tense and silent to oddly peaceful. Luke found himself looking forward to her company, the soft rhythm of her voice, the quiet strength in her movements, and the way she'd started to hum Apache melodies by the fire each night. But deep inside, Luke knew she couldn't stay forever. The world beyond his ranch wasn't kind to her people. Trouble could come any day, a patrol, bounty hunters, or settlers who'd see her as nothing more than an enemy. That evening, as the desert sun sank low, painting the sky in red and violet hues, Nayeli sat by the fire while Luke prepared supper. She looked thoughtful, almost sad. "Luke," she said quietly, "I should go soon." His hands froze. He turned slowly to face her. "Go. You're not strong enough yet." "I am," she said softly. "You saved my life. But my brother is still out there. I must find him." Luke's heart tightened. He wanted to tell her to stay, to forget the pain outside these walls, but he saw in her eyes the fire that wouldn't be tamed. "Then I can help you," he said after a moment. "I know the trails. I've got maps. You don't have to do this alone." Nayeli studied him quietly, her gaze deep and searching. "You would risk your life for me again." He met her eyes steadily. "You're worth the risk." For a long moment, silence hung between them. The fire crackled, and the desert wind sighed through the open window. Then, slowly, she reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Her touch was warm, strong. "You have a good heart, Luke Weston," she whispered. "The spirits will remember that." The next morning, when the first light broke over the desert, Luke saddled 2 horses. Nayeli stood beside him, her satchel packed, her eyes calm but determined. "Wherever this trail leads," Luke said, tightening the reins, "we'll face it together." Nayeli smiled faintly. "Then I am not afraid." As they rode out across the golden plains, side by side, the rising sun bathed them in light. The snakebite that had once brought death now marked the beginning of something far greater. 2 souls bound by fate, courage, and an unspoken promise beneath the endless sky of the American frontier.